Hey, what's up, guys? This is D, and you're watching the Rear Naked Podcast. As always, want to take a moment to thank everybody for continuing to support the channel so far and subscribe. If you haven't, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button down below on the YouTube channel, and you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Rear Naked Podcast. Now, before we get into UFC 241, we want to touch on a couple of things from the last 2 weeks' cards. Most notably, last Saturday, Shevchenko defended her belt against Liz Carmouche, and a lot of people giving both fighters flack, especially Shevchenko after that. But honestly, I think that she won that pretty standard fashion for a champion like that. Man, it's not her job to go out there and attack Carmouche. It's Carmouche's job to come at her and try to get the belt. So she defended her. Carmouche showed that she was afraid to get in the pocket and strike with her. She knew that Shevchenko was a far superior striker than her, so she didn't even want to get in and try to wrestle her or anything like that. And even when she did, we saw what happened there. So congratulations to Valentina Shevchenko for another successful title defense, and we look forward to seeing who her next opponent's going to be. And after that, we had, Mike Perry got his face smashed in by Vicente Luque. And, honestly, at this point, I think Perry's probably just hang it up, man. Go back to amateurs or something like that, or just go back to working at Burger King, because I just don't think he's got kind of like a Burger King attitude. And, for as much shit as he talks, he really he's been getting his ass whooped lately. So, I think it's time for Perry to either shut up and go back to the drawing board, or probably just hang it up. Then you got Colby Covington defeating Robbie Lawler on the third, and after that, going up to the booth and getting it cracking with Kamaru Usman. And I mean, honestly, both those guys are kind of drama queens and like to talk more in front of the cameras than anything else. But you put Colby in the cage with Usman, man, and Usman's gonna run right through him. He's gonna out wrestle him. He's gonna take him down and just smash him. So yeah, and even if you don't give him the next shot at Usman, none of the 3 or 4 dudes that are probably next in line to fight Colby other than Usman, he doesn't stand a chance against those guys either. He's I don't know if they'd put him against Masvidal, but I think if they did, Masvidal's definitely not going to have a problem fighting him, man. They're friends and everything, but I think Jorge comes down to it as business, and Jorge's got his eye on that belt. So I think if they did that and did it dirty, man, Masvidal would definitely take that fight. I don't know if Colby would, but aside from that, man, whether you have him fight, somebody like Darren Till or, Leon Edwards, either one of those dudes is probably going to whoop Colby's ass. So I think his best chance would probably be against Leon Edwards at this point. Aside from that, we got Ciryl Gane coming in from Ngannou's camp, and a real dangerous fighter, man, and showed that he's also got some technique on the ground as well, because won his fight Saturday night by submission. That's something that you don't see a whole lot with the heavyweights. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Gane, man. I think that's somebody that I think could climb the heavyweight rankings relatively quickly this year, and maybe by the end of the year be in the top 10, top 15 pretty easily. So definitely somebody that could threaten a lot of those guys with that kind of ground game, and not to mention the fact that he's clearly a huge individual with ability to put you to bed with one punch. So yeah, definitely psyched to see what goes on with Ciryl Gane, man. Moving on from that, we got UFC 241 coming up this Saturday, August 17th in Anaheim. We got Cormier versus Miocic for the second time, and this is finally Stipe's rematch that he's been waiting for quite a while. It's been just over a year. It was a year ago, July, that Cormier beat Stipe, and a lot of people thought it was a fluke, including myself. I've since watched the breakdown and sort of seen how well Cormier was able to transition from that overhook to the underhook and get inside and land that short hook on Stipe that knocked him out. But honestly, it was more Stipe's mistake than Cormier's ability that led to that win. So Stipe can keep things from being as sloppy as they were in that fight and getting drawn into Cormier's game like that, then he definitely has a chance still of knocking Cormier out. But I think we're probably going to see Cormier turn on the wrestling in this bout, man. He wanted to go out and probably prove that he could stand and fight with a big guy like Stipe last fight, and he did. And that's how he won the fight. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Cormier go in there and just try to out-wrestle him and take him into deep water and make an example of him there. So that's probably Cormier's best chance. I don't think that Cormier should try to stand and bang with Stipe again. I think Stipe's going to come in there with something to prove, man. And I think he's going to have a little more level head on his shoulders and maybe a little more humble. Maybe he underestimated Cormier in the first fight. So who knows? Either way, really looking forward to seeing that fight. And then after that, we got Nate Diaz making his return after 3 years against Anthony Pettis. And I cannot wait for this fight, man. It's been a long time since Nate fought. Last fight was against Conor, and it was a bullshit decision, a draw at best. And I cannot wait to see Nate fight somebody like Anthony Pettis, man. It's probably going to be one of his toughest fights to date, man. But with as skilled of a striker as Pettis is and as dangerous as he is with his flash, we've seen Nate fight people like that before. Conor's got great kicks. Conor's a great martial artist, but none of that shit worked with Nate. Nate will walk right into that shit. Both of the Diaz brothers will step right into stuff like that and make it pretty much ineffective and get to work with their boxing. They will touch you up and they will make you wilt. So yeah, I don't expect Pettis to be able to beat Nate in this fight unless he pulls off something crazy and just comes at him in the first round with a tremendous amount of pressure and some crazy shit and knocks him out. And that's not very likely to happen. So I think Nate's probably just going to drag him to deep water and like I said, man, he's going to make him wilt. He's going to touch him up and take him to the ground and probably choke him out or something. So then after that, we got Paulo Costa taking on Yoel Romero. And this is going to be a great fight too, man. This is a really, really even fight. These guys are matched up perfectly. They're both built like tanks. And this is going to be a crazy-ass fight. They're either going to be, grappling each other for 5 rounds, or it's going to be a 1 or 2 round fight and somebody's going to sleep. So looking forward to seeing all 3 of those main fights on that main card. Other than that, we got a lot of really good fights Saturday, so make sure you tune in early, man. You got Derek Brunson taking on Ian Heinisch. You got Corey Sandhagen fighting. Hannah Cyphers is on that card. Brandon Davis. A lot of really good fights on this card, so make sure you tune in. With that being said, we'll jump over to a couple of fan questions, and then we'll take a look at the fight picks. And the first question comes from Wes in Sacramento. Wes want to know what's next for Diaz if he wins this fight Saturday. Wes, that's a good question, man. I couldn't tell you whether or not Nate's gonna stay and look for a couple more fights at 170 or not, because if he does beat Pettis Saturday, honestly, that kind of opens the door for him to technically be seated at number 10 right away at welterweight, because that's where Anthony Pettis is at right now. So I think the number 10 spot is on the line right there. So if he hits that, it's definitely within reason to assume that Nate would stay and maybe take a fight with somebody like Tyron Woodley or maybe even Colby Covington, Darren Till, Jorge Masvidal. I would love to see those 2 fight each other, man. That'd be amazing. But yeah, I don't know if he's going to stay at 170 or if he's only got a couple fights left on his contract and he does beat Pettis Saturday, then you'd have to imagine that at some point out of those last couple of fights that Dana would have to give him that Conor rematch and finally settle up that trilogy, which I think millions of people are waiting to see. So with the way that went, it basically being a draw at best and them just giving him a decision because he was the golden boy. I still want to see that before Nate Diaz retires, man. I know he could carry less either way, whether he fights him or not, because he's already whooped his ass twice. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see what Nate does after that, man. We'll see what they give him. Next question comes from Mark in Raleigh. Mark want to know who I thought would win in a fight between Snoop Dogg and an 11-year-old girl. Mark, have you seen how Snoop throws a punch? Clearly, this little girl is going to have the advantage in this fight, man. So I'm going to give it to her. Although Snoop might have the strength of like two 11-year-old girls at this point, he's still not that big, and he can't throw a punch, man. So the little girl probably going to shoot, take him down, and put him to bed with some easy ground and pound. Awesome question, Mark. And with that being said, man, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and submit them to the Facebook page via Messenger at the Rear Naked Podcast, or you can send them over email at rearnakedpodcast@gmail.com. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and take a look at the fight picks this week. So kicking things off in the early prelims, we've got in the women's flyweight division, Sabina Mazo taking on Shayna Dobson, and we're going to go with Mazo in that fight. Then we've got in the bantamweight division for the men, Hyung Ho Kang taking on Brandon Davis. And tough opponent for Davis, but I think we're going to go ahead and pick Davis for that one. And then heading things off in the early prelim card in the women's strawweight division, we got Hannah Cyphers taking on Jody Escobel. And Escobel's a tough opponent, man, but I think as small as Cyphers is, she's shown that she can be pretty fiery, man. So I think we're going to go ahead and go with Cyphers in that fight. And kicking things off at the prelims, we got Manny Bermudez taking on Casey Kinney in the bantamweight division, and we got Bermudez for that. Then we got Christos Giagos taking on Drakkar Klose in the lightweight division, and we've got Drakkar Klose for that fight. Then we got Rafael Asuncao taking on Corey Sandhagen in the men's bantamweight division. We've got Sandhagen in that fight. And going up to head off the prelim card in the lightweight division, we got Devontae Smith taking on Clay Collard, and we got Smith for that one. Then kicking things off in the main card in the middleweight division, we got Derek Brunson versus Ian Heinisch. And although Heinisch is a real tough dude and this could go either way, we're going to go ahead and go with Brunson in that fight. Then we got Gabriel Benitez taking on Sodiq Youssef in the men's featherweight division. And we're going to go with Youssef on that fight. And then in the men's middleweight division, we got Yoel Romero taking on Paulo Costa. And we got Costa for that fight. Then in the co-main event at 170 pounds in the men's welterweight division, we got Anthony Pettis taking on Nate Diaz. Obviously, we're going to go with my boy Diaz for this fight. Like I said, Pettis is probably the toughest fight for him aside from Conor McGregor that he's ever had to face. But if you step into a lot of that flashy stuff and those spinning attacks, most of the time you can render that pretty ineffective. And you'll take those kicks or whatnot, or spinning back fists and shit. You take that shit to the shoulder, to the back, to the side, things like that. Stuff that's not going to necessarily take you out of the fight. And if Nate's able to withstand that for the first round and then turn it up like he usually does, regardless of the fact that Pettis is probably going to try to chop away at his legs with some low kicks. We've seen that happen a dozen times with Nate, and he can get in there and still walk at you, man. He's going to walk you down the whole fight, whether it's 3 rounds or 5 rounds, and he's going to touch you up, and he's going to make you wilt. So I think that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see Pettis come in there with some flash for the first round and try to overwhelm him with his size and some of his stand-up game. But if Nate chooses to take it to the ground, it's pretty much over for him. And I don't think Nate is necessarily ever looking to do that, even though he's an assassin on the ground and he's a very legit Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt. That's more just something that he finishes you with after he beats your face in. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see him touch up Pettis the entire fight and take him into deep waters and then probably take him down for a submission, if not finish him with some ground and pound. So going to go with my boy Diaz in that fight, obviously. And then moving up to the main event, we got Daniel Cormier taking on Stipe Miocic for the men's heavyweight title. And this is a long-awaited rematch. It's been a year ago, July, that Stipe lost his belt to Daniel Cormier. And this is Cormier's chance to solidify the fact that it maybe wasn't a fluke the first time that he won that fight. So if he comes in there and dominates him, which I expect to see him do with his wrestling, then I think Cormier keeps the belt. If not, and he tries to stand and bang with Stipe again, I think Stipe is probably going to win this fight. But I can't say, man. I'm probably leaning towards Cormier, because if Cormier turns on the wrestling and decides to do it that way, I think Cormier takes it 9 times out of 10. But if he stands and strikes with Stipe, I think there's a good chance Stipe's not going to let this one go again, man. So be interesting to see what happens with that one. With that being said, make sure you guys get your fight picks in every week. You can submit them to rearnakedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send them to us via Facebook Messenger at the Facebook page at the Rear Naked Podcast. And if you pick a perfect fight card, whoever picks a perfect fight card every week, we'll send a free Rear Naked Podcast t-shirt out to. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for the show this week. I want to thank you, as always, for tuning into the show. If you haven't, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button down below on the YouTube channel. And please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Rear Naked Podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks.